Community Church Unitarian Universalist gathers in person and virtually in these unaccustomed times. Our purpose is to form a community to practice and advance a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. As a progressive, open-minded, and inclusive religious community, we believe we do not have to think alike to love alike. Ours is a faith in action, and as we do the work of justice and compassion in our quest to live ethically, recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of all, we welcome those who come in the spirit of love. You are welcomed here. The message for today will be presented by our congregation member, Jim O'Neill. Jim O'Neill and his wife, Vera, are members of this congregation, and he serves on Community Church's Board of Trustees. He's a member of the worship committee, and he's done brought us several messages, done several lovely sermons, not forgettable. Dr. Jim O'Neill is a licensed professional counselor who has for over 40 years provided pastoral psychotherapy for the New Orleans community. He taught for years in Loyola's Institute for Ministry. We have a treat ahead of us, I have no doubt. It is our custom in Community Church to light a chalice, invoking hope and eternal truths to our worship. Let me light the candle first. Oh, you're going to do it, please. Please join as you can in singing our words that we traditionally sing. We light this flame to affirm the light of truth and knowledge and the love and community and the fire of hope and commitment. Our religious education director, Cynthia Ramirez, brings us Alan Malone brings us his message, a stewardship moment. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Al Malone, as most of you know. Marilyn and I have been members of this congregation for 5 or 6 years. Before that, we were members of the North Shore community.
Come to the microphone.
Okay. Starting in 1998, and we moved down here several years ago. Y'all can do the math. So we've been UU members for quite some time, and we're very happy with this community. And so I guess they asked me to come up and tell you how happy I am about this. We're raising funds now, and if you think about it, the different religions or different religious groups tend to take different approaches to raising funds. One of the prominent Jewish organizations here in town, I remember some Jewish friends of mine were having some relatives in from out of town for the holy days. And it's too bad they didn't get to do it, because the visitors didn't get to attend services during the holy days because they weren't members and they hadn't paid their dues. So only dues-paying members were welcome, and that was dictated. Whatever the needs of the congregation were, they figured out what that was, and they told you every year, and that's what you were required to put up. That's, when you think about it, that's not too bad, but it's not exactly the way we tend to do things. And then many fundamentalist Christian groups, they do tithing, don't they? They say, okay, we'll just take 10% of everything that you make this year and give it to us. I'm not sure how they formulate that 100%, but if you're expected to give 10% of what you make every year to the church. Those people never seem to be in financial difficulty, do they? They're doing pretty well. It's a pretty good way of doing it in that way. But we're kind of a little bit more libertarian in our thinking, I guess, and we just ask you to give what you can give. And last week it was announced a very important number, I think, and that I think is important for us to know. Because when we were first in the North Shore, we knew that there were some people pledging $500, $700 a year, and they thought that was big money. They thought that was fine. They thought that was doing their duty. And my response to that was, well, no, you should, if that's what you're going to give, you should be aware that that is substantially less than what it costs to run this organization. So somebody last week came up with a number $3,000 per, and then somebody else asked the question, does that mean $3,000 per person or $3,000 per pledge limit? And I noticed that the answer to that question was never given. Somebody ducked it. Somebody says, that's right, But nobody ever told which one that was. And I don't know the answer to that. So if you want to know the answer to that, find somebody who's on the board of trustees, like Kathy Lambert sitting over there, and she can probably tell you, or she'll duck the question or whatever it is. But the number is, we have so many pledge units, and if each of them gives a minimum of $3,000, we'll make our nut. So that's something to keep in mind. I know that there are people who can't come up with $3,000 a month, excuse me, $3,000 a year. There are people who can't come out with $3,000 a month for sure. I'm one of them. But it's something that something the board comes together with every year and develops a plan for spending, which we call a budget. That's what a budget is. It's a plan for spending. And normally what you do is you make a list of things that are going to cost you money in the coming year, and then you come up with a number, and then you divide it by the number of people who's got to pay it, and that's where we get that $3,000. So every year we're asking you to make a pledge, and that pledge, by the way, doesn't have to be given in one dose. Marilyn and I, for most of the time we were attending at North Shore, we would take a 1/50th or something of our pledge and put it in the collection tray every week, and that's how we paid ours, because we weren't in a financial position to give the whole thing. That's fine, or if you want to give it on a monthly basis or a semi-annual basis, that's okay. You don't have to do the whole thing all at the same time. Anyway, we've been going, tomorrow is supposedly the last day of the drive, and we, as of last week, we were down around the 20% mark. And that wasn't too good. But during the week, bingo, we've had some people come up. I guess we're coming near the thing that said, I guess I better go ahead and do it. So now we're up to $97,636. And that comes to 65%. We've jumped from 20 to 65% in 1 week. That's pretty good. Maybe we could either keep that going and jump from 65 up to 100% between now and tomorrow. You think that's going to happen? No, but I hope we keep on giving, even if the time for doing this is expired. That doesn't mean that we're going to turn away if you say, hey, I have $100,000 for you. Sorry, the drive's over. Go put it in the bank. No, that's not the way it's going to work. We're not going to be satisfied if we get less than $150,000. That's what the board has determined that we need to do the things that we want to do this coming year. Starts out with paying the utilities and paying the upkeep for this building, which is considerable. And what else? Insurance, things like that. Those are bottom line things that we can't operate without. And then we have some other things that we like to be able to do. We like to support those guys who make the fancy feathered things at Mardi Gras. I've always thought, that's not something I would ever think of sending that guy money for. But since it came up and since he does such a nice presentation every year, I've seen the logic of that. I think that's a pretty good thing. I'm very satisfied with having part of my donation go toward that. We're supporting some people who have immigrated from Central America. We're helping them out financially and in some other ways. I think that's a worthwhile thing. And maybe there's a couple of things that I'm not that involved with. Some of my money's going to that. Some people who get into the church get involved with as what Reverend Jim used to call your time, your treasure, and your talent. And particularly with the talent, we like to see people get interested in some particular thing. And if it's not going on, how about we approach the board and see if we can get it done? This coming year, I hope, with the approval of the board, I haven't gotten to them yet, but I hope to continue the writing seminar that we've been doing for the last 3 years, where members can come in and take this seminar called the Shared Pulpit and learn how to write and to present a sermon. And that'll have some good effects too, because I think we're going to be without a minister probably till the end of August. And I really hope that we spend some money doing a really, really good search for a good minister. Because in the North Shore, once again, we lost our minister, and UUA says, oh, here's another one. You can use him for a while. And he was a total dud. I mean, he did not help us at all. It was a backward thing for us. He was coming in right after the big hurricane, and he was asking us to hire an administrative assistant for him. And we said, what? We're trying to get some money together to get the roof fixed. And then after that, we got some gal who was in the initial stages of mental deterioration. She was having a hell of a thing. She needed a lot of help right at the time when we needed a lot of help. So that was another thing. We had to pay salaries for those people. And not only did they not help us, but that we had to help them a bit. And that was very unsatisfactory to me. Since then, the North Shore has been doing without a full-time minister. I don't know if y'all know that. So we kind of take for granted that we're going to be a group with a full-time professional minister, and I think that's as it should be. However, I hope that we don't take some turkey who's available just because the UUA says, oh yeah, we got this person, stick them in there until August, and then you can pay their salary while they just don't do much for you. I hope we don't do that. Anyway, and I hope we spend that money and that time doing a really, really good search so we get another really, really good clergy person at the end of it. Anyway, congratulations to us. We're up to $97,636, which is 63% of our goal. And let's keep it coming. And you're about to have a reward for all of this in addition to all these things I just mentioned, and that is a feast which is going to be laid before you. And my lovely wife Marilyn is now going to come and tell you about this. Thank you.
Well, good morning. And I know we're going to make that goal, right? We are. We've done it before, and often in the past, we've exceeded our goal, okay? So be positive. We are going to do this. We are going to do this, and we will be rewarded, and the reward will be this wonderful, fantastic brunch, a jazz brunch that you all will just love on Saturday, November 20th, starting from 11 to 1. And we are going to have a wonderful, delicious, catered menu that is going to be by the owner and chef of Station 6. I don't know if you all know her, Allison Vega. She is catering our gorgeous meal, our wonderful, delicious meal. We will have a vegetarian option for people who would prefer a vegetarian or follow a vegetarian diet. We'll have some champagne, and Nick is going to supply us with some wonderful music. You know how he does, okay? So you will feel like you're at Commander's, right? Okay. And you will feel good because we will have met our goal, and we will celebrate that. I'd particularly like it if you could give me your reservation by Tuesday, because I have to tell Allison the count of how many people we will have by then. So please do that. You could either just tell me or send me an email or call me or whatever. And if you would like a flyer about it to help you remember that it's Saturday, this coming Saturday, November 20th, at 11 o'clock, I have flyers. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. As Cynthia comes up with her Words for All Ages, I wanted to tell you that right after that, Nicholas will be playing the beautiful hymn number 173, if you want to follow in your hymnal. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. The book I'm going to read to you today reminds me of my father, and is called Franny's Father is a Feminist. This is Franny. This is Franny's father. Franny's father is a feminist. He knows that girls can be anything, can do anything boys can do, and raises Franny to believe she deserves all the same rights, freedoms, and opportunities that he has. It's simple, really. When Franny's father was a child, he and his sister did chores around the house. His parents assigned him mowing the lawn and taking out the trash, and his sister did the dishes and helped with the laundry. "Why can't I mow the lawn?" she complained. "That's a boy's chore," their dad explained. To young Franny's father, this seemed very odd. One day, he offered to swap. His sister mowed the whole lawn in no time flat. Franny's father was impressed. He had always loved the smell of fresh laundry anyway. When Franny was little, she loved to sort all the tools from the workbench in the garage. Franny's father taught her all the names and how to use them all. Soon, Franny could take her bicycle apart and put it back together all by herself. They since moved to larger vehicles like cars. One weekend, when he wasn't working, Franny's father takes her fishing. Franny baits her own hook and doesn't even gag. When Franny catches more fish than her father, he tells her she reminds him of his sister when she was a little girl. When the fish aren't biting, Franny plays in the mud and catching frogs. She proudly leaves a ring of dirt on the tub. Girls should be able to do anything the boys do. Franny's father sighs and grabs a sponge. This is Franny's mother. She has an important job. When Franny's mother leaves her work before Franny is even out of bed, Franny's father helps her get ready for school. He is an expert hair braider and knows all the cool styles. But he always lets Franny pick out her own clothes. Just be yourself. Sometimes when Franny's father picks her up from school, they stop at her mother's office to see the next big project she's designing. Franny, excited when she sees her mother test the latest computer programs, she lets Franny push buttons to make things move on the screen. On the way home, Franny asks, Whose job is more important, Mom's or yours? Franny father smiles. We both share the most important job in the world, and that's raising you. Franny participates in many after-school activities. Franny's father is very supportive. He is proud of Fanny when she helps a teammate score the winning goal at her hockey game. Franny's father also enjoys watching her perform in ballet recitals. Ooh. Sometimes he can be a little too supportive. After homework time, Franny and her parents love to watch movies together. When Franny's father tears up, she hands him a tissue. Franny knows her dad cries, and that's okay. Franny's friends love summer parties at her house. Her father tells them campfire stories in their backyard. Between his favorite ghost stories, Franny's father slips in tales of historic women while stoking the fire. He tells them about Claire Marie Hodges, who in 1918 became the first female park ranger for the national parks, and Sally Ride, who was the first American woman to fly into space. One more story before bed, Fanny always pleads. So he tells them more of the brave young woman like Ruby Bridges, the girl who broke racial barriers between segregated elementaries in the 1960s. And Malala Yousafzai, I always forget her name, who today is paving the way for girls to be able to attend school all around the world. Franny and her friends are grateful they already are able to learn in school. When times are tough, Franny's father teaches her that you always have to stand up for what matters to you most. Sometimes they make signs. Franny's father believes in his daughter and daughters everywhere and helps her build the confidence to believe in herself. After all, that's what a feminist father does. The end.
Good morning. Today's readings are from Thomas Berry's book, The Dream of the Earth. Thomas Berry was one of the 20th century's visionaries and most profound thinkers. As a cultural historian, he sought a broader perspective on humanity's relationship to the earth in order to respond to the ecological and social changes of our times. His books include The Great Work, The Universe Story, and The Dream of the Earth. He rejected the label theologian and called himself geologian. Barry believed that humanity, after generations spent in despoiling the planet, is poised to embrace a new role as a vital part of a larger, interdependent Earth community consisting of, quote, a communion of subjects, not a collection of objects. Today's readings are excerpts from his chapter entitled Patriarchy, a New Interpretation of History.
A new interpretation of Western historical development is emerging through the concept of patriarchy. It is an interpretive pattern consisting of pre-patriarchy, patriarchy, and post-patriarchy, terms that are frequently met with in recent writings on contemporary cultural issues. Pre-patriarchy has special reference to the patricentric period of old Europe, which flourished apparently from around 6,500 BC until the Aryan invasions around 3,500 BC. Patriarchy is coterminous. I feel a little bit like I'm back in seminary. Is coterminous with the Western civilization process for the past 5,000 years. Post-patriarchy identifies with the ecological period of total participatory governance presently emerging as the context of future historical development of Western civilization and even of the global civilizational enterprise. The sequence of historical periods might be designated as the patricentric, and omnicentric periods. By using the suffix centric rather than archal, we move from the idea of dominion or rule to that of cultural integrity. The ecological period is designated as omnicentric to indicate that ecosystems are a comprehensive participatory process. This period might also be termed the ecofeminist period, since the spontaneities and nurturing qualities of the period might traditionally be designated as feminine. This is a contrast to the patricentric period, which is generally designated in its oppressive aspects as patriarchy. As we look back on the Western historical process, we can identify 4 patriarchal establishments that have been in control of Western history over the centuries. However benign our view of these establishments, or however brilliant in some of their achievements, we must observe that they have become progressively virulent in their destructive powers until presently they are bringing about the closing down of all the basic life systems of the planet. These 4 establishments are the classical empires, the ecclesiastical establishment, the nation-state, and the modern corporation. These 4 are exclusively male-dominated and primarily for fulfillment in terms of the human as envisaged by men. Women had minimal, if any, consistent role in the direction of these establishments. As regards the ecological integrity of the earth, the 4 establishments that we have mentioned all come under condemnation as leading to a non-viable mode of the human and even to a non-viable mode of the earth in its major life systems. As Norman Myers has indicated, we are bringing about an extension spasm that is likely to produce the greatest setback to the abundance and variety of life since the first flickering of light on Earth some 4 billion years ago. That we should presently be killing off the rainforest at the rate of some 50 acres per minute is an irreversible tragedy. When we consider especially that these rainforests contain fully half the living species of life upon the earth, and that they took some 65 million years to attain their present status, this is obviously a pathology beyond adequate description or comprehension. The situation is further aggravated when we consider that none of the institutions that we have identified as the 4 basic patriarchal establishments has seriously protested the situation nor made serious efforts to stop its involvement in the process. No? Too eager. Community Church Unitarian Universalist is a self-sustaining congregation. The generosity of members and friends enables the congregation to fulfill its purpose in doing the sacred work of bringing justice, spirituality, and compassion to our community and beyond. You can make your donation online at ccunola.org/stewardship or texting 504-370-2659, enter GIVE, and you'll be prompted. For virtual donations, there is a 3% processing fee. You can also, of course, always mail a check to 6690 Fleur de Lis Drive, 70124, New Orleans. The congregation is invited to put their gifts in the offering dish. Your support is appreciated. Was Grandmother's Minuet by Edvard Grieg. It's pretty peppy for Grandma. In this time, we do thank you for your gifts. In this time in our service, we continue to weave together the fabric of our community as we take the opportunity to share a sorrow or a joy with one another. If you need a note card to jot down something you'd like to say, Marilyn will pass them out if you'd like them. Those of you that are virtual, if you can put your joy or your sorrow in the chat box, we'll attempt to read them if somebody can check. Does anybody have their phone that they could check? Thank you very much, Alicia. A candle will be lit with each sentiment, 2 for the joys and sorrows that have remained silent. Thank you. I would like to light a candle of joy for my precious Chloe. Her birthday is today. She's 4. Thank you. Alan writes, he got rid of his something cataract, second cataract last Wednesday. And then he turned 79 years old on Saturday. A very productive week, a lot to celebrate. There's a concern that Dorothy fell last night and is in the hospital. Said we will get the updates and pass them on to you. We certainly will keep her in our thoughts. Yes. Uh-huh.
We got word that our good friend from North Shore, Andre Bouvier, you may have heard him play in his group. He comes every St. Patrick's Day to our front porch, and his group plays. Anyway, one of the things that he lost during the hurricane was a suitcase in which he had all of his memories about his father. And he never knew his father. He just knew of his father from his sister, but never did meet his father or know his father. And all he had was this box of mementos and pictures, things about his father, and he lost that in Ida and says that that's just, a terrific loss for him, and so we want to light a candle for him.
Tragedy. And we'll keep Ruth in our thoughts. And we don't seem to have any digital. Oh, you do? Thank you.
I would just request a candle for one of my students. He's 14 years old, and he very suddenly lost his mother last week. And we've only recently been able to, have adults in the building, so I got to meet his mother during our back to school night, and he was dragging her all over the classroom and showing her absolutely everything, was clearly so excited to have her there. And I have not seen him since then, so please keep him in your thoughts.
If there are no others, Cynthia will light a last candle for the joy that has remained within your heart, and one for the sorrow that is unspeakable at this moment. Know that you are loved and cared for as part of this community and as a fellow human being. We thank you very much, Cynthia. A second reading from Patriarchy by Thomas Berry. From her studies, Judy Chicago concludes that all ecological evidence indicates that the matriarchal cultures were egalitarian, democratic, peaceful, but female-oriented agricultural societies gradually gave way to male-dominated political state in which occupational specialization, commerce, social stratification, and militarism developed. Reflection on the basic human values expressed in this earlier cultures and their suppression by the patriarchal culture of the invading Aryan peoples is bringing about a reevaluation of the entire Western civilization enterprise as it has developed over the past 5,000 years. When the apparent success of the earlier matricentric period is seen in contrast with the devastation of the earth resulting from the civilizational order that followed, we have a comprehensive critique of the Western civilizational process that has probably never been surpassed. We are confronted with a profound reversal of values. The entire course of Western civilization is seen as vitiated by patriarchy, the aggressive, plundering, male domination of our society. This condemnation is more severe in its implication than the secularist judgment of our religious culture as suppressive of basic human values. It is also greater than the Marxist condemnation of bourgeois oppression of the proletariat. If we inquire into the driving forces that have evoked this critical reevaluation of Western civilization, we can identify them as rising consciousnesses of women and the devastation of their basic living forms of earth presently taking place in consequence of the male-dominated regimes that have existed during this period. The new mode of ecological consciousness now emerging sees the new period of the earth community as having a basic nurturing aspect that tends more towards traditional feminine than toward traditional masculine qualities. Our message this morning.
In our readings today, Thomas Berry, a treasured mentor of mine, whom I had the privilege of hearing at Loyola University 7 years before his death, has described the 4 patriarchal establishments that have been control of Western history over the centuries. While acknowledging their achievements, ultimately they've been destructive and are bringing about the shutting down of all the basic life systems of the planet. They are the classical empires, the ecclesiastical establishment, the nation state, and the modern corporation. Now, in the classical empires, patriarchy often took the form of endowing the leaders with divine status and making their power absolute, requiring complete submission or death. As Berry put it, once the natural and human worlds were envisioned as inherently subject to the strife for power, the way of peace and pacifism was no longer available. Thus our truism that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. While most Americans would not condone such abuses of power, we have recently experienced a rise in nationalism and a leader who came dangerously close to undermining our democracy with his desperate attempts to stay in power. This patriarchal leader, who behaved like he and this nation were independent entities, not subject to any other power on earth, used the concept of a unique greatness and supremacy of our nation to justify his withdrawal from international agreements and to fan the flames of racial division. That mentality in a patriarchal leader and in a nation was used to justify the aggressive use of power to gain conquest and dominion. As evidence of how powerful patriarchy has been in our nation, remember that women were not allowed to vote until 1920. And it took until 1981 for the first woman to be appointed to the Supreme Court. The modern corporation is another destructive manifestation of patriarchy. While presenting an image of serving with mottos of progress is our most important product, or better living through chemistry, you fill in the rest. The fact is we no longer live in the ever-renewing cycle of nature, but within the cycle of industrial production and consumption. Currently, industrial society is so erratic that the promise of jobs is unreliable, leaving many jobless or with low-income jobs that cannot support a family. You heard just this week, how many Americans quit. The products last only briefly and then contribute to a world of universal waste and maximal entropy. The consequences of this dominance by men have left women in corporations in subordinate, underpaid roles where they have been exploited and often treated as sexual objects. The ongoing protest of the Me Too movement tells us that patriarchal power continues to create misery for women in the modern corporation. To detail further how destructive patriarchy functions in nations and in modern corporations would take more than we have time for today. And so I will focus just on how patriarchy in church institutions might be transformed. Thomas Berry's assessment of ecclesiastical institutions as destructive patriarchies might surprise some people, but not me. Some of you know about the early part of my life, raised in a Catholic home, intrigued as an altar boy by the sacredness and mystery, and inspired to be of service, following the example of Jesus. When his apostles were arguing over who was the greatest, he replied, "Earthly kings lord it over their people. We cannot be that way. Let the greater of you be the junior, and the leader as the servant, for I am among you as one who serves." Well, I chose that path of service by entering the seminary after high school and ended up being chosen to begin my graduate studies in Rome at the Gregorian University in 1965. I arrived just in time for the end of the Second Vatican Council, which was held from 1962 to October of 1965. Pope John the 23rd, Angelo Roncalli, one of 13 children of sharecroppers, was elected at age 76 and was expected to be a caretaker pope. But he surprised everyone by calling for an aggiornamento, a bringing up to date of the ancient institution which judged to be closed to the modern world. He wanted to open the windows and let the fresh air of the Holy Spirit in. I was studying the documents of the Second Vatican Council, including the Church in the modern world, as they were being written. Those were exciting, inspiring, and hopeful times. But even while I was a student in Rome, I began to have misgivings. The bishops and cardinals who came to visit our North American College on Janiculum Hill overlooking the Vatican, with few exceptions, they did not look nor behave like their lives were given to service. There was a lot of pomp, privilege, and entitlement that did not fit the message or the behavior of Jesus of Nazareth. It gradually became clear to me that if the hierarchy was to walk the talk of the council, we should soon welcome women into the priesthood, as well as married priests. Now, it took a long time for my misgivings to grow as I continued my journey to the priesthood, but 8 years after ordination, I realized painfully that the male hierarchy was entrenched in their authority and power and were not willing to make any of the serious changes that were needed for the church to be of service to all people. Now, I could go down the list of the ways these celibate men dictated the lives of married couples, treating them like children, and judging homosexuals and LGBTQs. I no longer believe much of their propaganda. I certainly could not preach it. So as I shared here in a previous sermon, I left the priesthood, proposed to my dear friend Vera, she said yes, and shifted my ministry to pastoral counseling and psychotherapy. We were soon blessed with our daughter, Lisa. Our frustration with the hierarchical church led us eventually to find our spiritual home in the Unitarian Universalist community. 50 years after the Second Vatican Council, I had this daydream of what could have happened if the Holy Spirit and not the patriarchy had prevailed at the council. I will take you now on an imaginary journey of how I envision the church being transformed. For those of you with a Catholic or Christian background, some of this will be familiar. For the rest of you, let your imagination follow along. Imagine then, it's 1965. The sun is rising over the Duomo of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome on the last day of the Second Vatican Council. Nearby in the deep recesses of the Vatican City, Pope Paul VI, who became Pope after Pope John died in 1962, is awakened by a terrifying dream. In Pope Paul's dream, it is his predecessor, Angelo Roncalli, Pope John the 23rd, who is processing into the convocation of bishops in St. Peter's on this last day of the Second Vatican Council. On both sides of the magnificent nave of St. Peter's are the bleachers, lined with cardinals garbed in bright red and bishops garbed in purple cassocks. As he approaches the Bernini columns over the raised altar, what one sees on his face is not the satisfaction of a job well done, but a visage of frustration and sadness. As he sits on the throne of St. Peter and faces the church full of male clerics, he calls out, "Non è finito." It is not finished. Then again louder, "Il nostro lavoro non è finito." Our work is not finished. If we stop now, we have failed the Holy Spirit which has brought us together. He said, "While I was walking in this morning, I looked on and blessed the faithful, waiting for a glimpse of their Holy Father. I saw one lovely family with a little girl who looked at a long procession in clerical garments, turned to her parents and said, 'She was not loud, just loud enough for me to hear. Where are the women priests?'" Pope John continued, "As I look out over this church filled with male celibate clergy, I have the terrible sinking feeling that all we have done these 3 years of our council may be lost if we do not do the one thing required by the Holy Spirit who brought us here. We have opened the window of aggiornamento and updating of our ancient church, but we have kept our doors and our minds and our ears closed to women. The few women we have here, we have called observerati, observers, which means they are here only to observe us. We've chosen not to listen to them. We made a terrible and dangerous mistake, and we have perpetuated it for years, no, centuries. And it is a mistake that can destroy our church." He went on, "Our terrible mistake is that we cannot hear our mother's voice, our sister's voice, our wife's voice, and our daughter's voice, because we've locked them outside. And without the balancing influence of women, the wedding feast, the celebration of the union of masculinity and femininity created by God, lacks the new wine to make it a real celebration. Without the wine of new life in our church, the rituals become empty gestures. Oh, we have wine of our own making, but when we put that wine into the old wineskins of antiquated, male-dominated patriarchy, we know what will happen. And when the wineskins burst and the new life of the church we have carefully cultivated will be lost." In the dream, Pope John continued to speak. So what is left for us to do? I think you know it in the deep recesses of your heart, he said to his fellow clergy. "I will speak what has been hidden in secret, for we know that before God all secrets will be exposed. First, he said, we will extend this counsel, and every man here will invite a respected woman of faith to come meet with us about our church. And we will listen to them for as long as is needed until we have sewn together new wineskins to hold the new life of the church. One piece of that new wineskin is that women will be invited back into the priesthood as they were in the early church. Second, we will open the ranks of the priesthood, the episcopacy, the papacy to women and married men. Celibacy, a charism for some, will no longer be a requirement for those who choose a life of ministry. Third, with the help of women of faith and courage, we will expose the secrets of clerical abuse and pedophilia, separate out the wolves in shepherd's clothing among us, and set about the ministry of healing those wounded by priests among us who have abused the power entrusted to them and violated the sacred trust of ministry. Finally, Pope John said there's one more thing we must do. With that, Angelo Roncalli, Pope John, stood up and cried aloud, "Basta! Enough! and took off his mitre and said, "No longer will the Pope wear a king or emperor's crown. Our heads will be bare like the poor among us who have no protection from the cold and rain." Then he got up from the throne, laid down the golden crozier, and sitting down on the steps said, "No longer will we carry symbols of the rich and powerful or sit on a throne." When Jesus was asked who will sit at his right and left hand, he answered, "I am among you as one who serves." Finally, the Pope said, "Do as I do," and took off the gold chasuble and the red shoes and walked through the middle of his shocked brother priests, bishops, and cardinals in a simple black robe and his stocking feet. He left St. Peter's not through the protected entrance to the Vatican, but right out through the front doors of the Basilica, out into the sunshine, into the embrace of the waiting faithful. That's the end of the daydream. Pope Paul VI awoke in a sweat, was deeply distressed, terrified by what it might mean. He thought about how difficult it would be to make these changes. And then ultimately shook his head, told himself it was a bad dream, a nightmare, put on his papal garments, picked up the homily prepared by the German theologian on dogma, Joseph Ratzinger, and walked into St. Peter's. So we know the rest of that story. As the patriarchal institution of the Catholic Church ignored the promptings of the Holy Spirit and continued its path of male-dominated authoritarianism. They lacked the openness, imagination, and courage needed for the transformative change that Pope John XXIII had called for. You know, when I was a theology student, I was taught that the one unforgivable sin is the sin against the Holy Spirit. Now, why would that be, I thought? Well, because if you are an institution or ruled by power and control and ego, you are not open to the guidance of the divine, however it manifests in your life. The end of patriarchy in the church that I imagine has not happened in the Catholic Church. And that is why I could no longer remain a member, much less be part of the patriarchal hierarchy. That's why I'm here today with you, and very grateful and encouraged by the ongoing work of our church to end patriarchy. So thank you for joining me in imagining what the end of patriarchy would look like in an ecclesial institution. Now the task for us is to imagine what ending patriarchy would be like in our nation's political, legislative, and judicial institutions. As of January 2021, how many seats of Congress were held by women? 144 out of 539. That's 27%. And that represents a 50% increase from a decade ago. But it remains far below the female share of the U.S. population. And of course, ending patriarchy also means changing the ways Congress functions from the male hierarchical competitive model to a more feminine, collaborative, cooperative model. We are currently facing a Supreme Court deliberately stacked to maintain patriarchy and male domination. Well, we are making progress, but given the ecological disaster we're facing, Congress is moving way too slow in curbing the corporations that are polluting, exploiting, and destroying the planet. The next piece of our work would be to look at our modern corporations and imagine what it would take to root out patriarchy by taking out language that is archal, referring to dominance or rule, and replacing it with centric, what Thomas Berry called the omnicentric movement. This omnicentric period we are entering in is ecological, indicating that ecosystems are comprehensive participatory process. We could also call this period ecofeminist, honoring the nurturing, sensitive, and responsive qualities traditionally designated as female. In modern corporate life, we no longer grow our own food, we buy our food. We no longer sustained in the ever-renewing cycle of nature. We live now within the cycle of industrial production and consumption. In the natural world, there's no such problem of disposing of some product. The waste product from one becomes the nourishment for another. On the other hand, we're making a world of universal waste and maximum entropy. Women will tell you how typical it is of men to leave it to women to clean up the messes they make. So, when you think of the work ahead of us in transforming our patriarchal institutions and behaviors, it's very challenging. But what we can imagine, we can make happen. To feed your imagination, spend time in the natural world and its beauty, and you will be inspired to protect our Mother Earth and transform our way of living to honor her. And when you reach for your cup of coffee in the morning, I encourage you to follow the motto on this cup that our daughter gave me. Give me a refill. The patriarchy isn't going to fight itself. It will be our job to defeat it. For our closing blessing, it's an invitation. I've changed a few of the words from John Lennon's Imagine, and I'll read it to you, and then ask Nick to sing it for us as our closing. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us, only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for. And no dogmas, too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will be as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A sisterhood of all. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one.
Thank you, Nicholas. This ends today's service of worth giving and worship. We hope you found something of value for your life. Go in peace, my friends.